Yo, what's up? Welcome back to the channel. My name is Jesse and this is How to Drum and Bass. And on this channel, it is my mission to teach you all about the most awesome things in drum and bass production. And today we're going to look at a fan request because one of you emailed me, and I've actually heard this come by several times, that they wanted to learn more about the 4x4 type of beat that you keep hearing a lot in tracks by Dimension these days and a lot of other popular artists as well. As a matter of fact, I think 4x4 is taking over drum and bass a little bit. Some people like it, some people don't. I think that in moderation, it's great energy for a set. There are artists such as, for example, Dimension that are actually probably gravitating more towards producing 4x4. And it's actually kind of cool because as a Dutchman myself, it really reminds me of the old gubber, sort of like the early, happy hardcore type stuff. And yeah, it's good energy and it is on the same rhythm as drum and bass, so it fits really nicely. And it's a great way to switch up from a drop that is traditional drum and bass to something a little bit more energetic, so you can introduce new elements and a different type of energy in your track and keep people engaged. So in this video, we're going to talk about probably what is the most simplest form of 4x4. We're going to talk about what is 4x4 anyway and what different names it has, but we're going to dive into this topic a little bit deeper in later videos on this channel because it's happening so much in drum and bass that I want to cover a wide variety of uses of this. So we're going to look at some examples from Delta Heavy, and we're going to look at some examples of a track that I'm working on currently and dive a lot deeper into how to employ 4x4 in your drum and bass production. That's going to be in multiple videos on this channel, so definitely hit that subscribe button to stay updated on that. But today we're going to talk about Dimension's newest track with Alison Wonderland, which, by the way, that's a crazy, super cool call out right there. But anyway, fanboying aside, I think a very good track to use as an example for this video because it's relatively simple and it shows the essence of 4x4. As always, you can download the presets for everything, the Ableton racks, the Serum presets, etc. in the link below, so don't forget to check that out. And also, if you're interested in learning more about drum bass sound design, I have a brand new course all about that, which I'll tell you a little bit more about later in this video. For now, let's move on to what we're gonna do today. All right, so we're gonna have a look at a 4x4 structure that is the same as Dimension's new song, Satellite. It has 3 different drum patterns that usually in drum and bass or in like that happy hardcore vibe transition into each other. So let's listen to what that is, what we've got here.
If you're looking for me tonight, I'll take you high like satellite, make you believe.
Okay, so we've got the most simple form, which is, and then usually what happens is after some period of time to, sort of switch things up, a snare or a clap or some form of other percussion will be added in, which we can hear a little bit later in the song.
From the sky, here we go. Feelings take you over, make your heart beat into mine. If you're looking for me.
So you can hear that snare comes in there, and then what happens is to sort of increase the energy, an open hi-hat is introduced.
I'll take you high like satellite. Here we go.
Right, so we have, and then we can add a clap to that, and then we, sorry for my beatboxing skills, and then an open hi-hat is added to that to give it a little bit more energy. So we've got 3 stages. We're going to talk about all of them today. So maybe let's start really quickly with what is 4x4? Why is it called that way, and does it go by any different names? It goes by several different names, but it's called 4x4 because when we look at the drum pattern here of the kick is 4x4. So it's on every beat there is a kick, and it's a very straightforward pattern. It's ding, 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 ding. So 4 on the floor is basically just when the kick hits on every beat, as you can see here. Whereas with drum bass, that other beat would probably be about here. So that's not 4 on the floor. And, it goes by many names, 4 on the floor, 4x4. Some people just call it like a hardcore or a psytrance type of beat when they're talking about it. I'm not sure how accurate that is, but it does describe what is happening in those genres. For now, I think we call it 4 on the floor or 4x4. And so let's have a look at, a little bit at the drum pattern of what's happening here. It's really actually very simple. So it's a kick on every beat. I realized before I had the snare, but it's the same type of thing. So on the first beat, and then, just on every beat after that. So by itself, it sounds like this. Very simple. And then what happens later is we add in a snare, and the snare comes exactly in between those kicks. So you see here that we will have one kick and then another kick, and another kick. So let's say we have 4. And on 2 of those, we will actually place snares. Now, it's up to you whether you still also want to play this kick or whether you want to actually take these 2 out. It depends a little bit on what kind of kick and what kind of snare or clap you're working with, whether that sounds cool or not. But generally speaking, what we have is, this very straightforward, symmetric interplay between the kick and the snare. So it's... However, one difference for sure that we see is that in most of these songs, the snare is not really like a traditional drum bass snare. Usually the drum bass snare is quite punchy, whereas when we're looking at this type of 4x4, or when we look back to sort of the old, like happy hardcore type stuff where this originates from, the gabber stuff, is that it's more of a clap type snare. Right, so you can hear that I just picked just randomly, not that much effort went into it, but just a clap and a snare combined. So it's a lot more sort of snappy, and it doesn't have that high transient on that sort of 200 hertz area that a normal drum and bass snare has. Okay, so basically the only thing left to add to the drum pattern, right, the only other element is this open hi-hat, and it's also actually really simple. So we have the kick here, we have the snares here, and just in between the kick and the snare, we're going to place an open hi-hat. And it doesn't really matter what it is. It can have any type of timbre. Just, look what sounds well in your song. But that essentially sounds like this. And what that's going to do is it's going to fill up really nicely that drum pattern. So let's listen really quickly to what we have here, right? We have this kick just playing by itself. When we add the snare, we get this. When we add the open hat, we get this. That's already very funky. All right, so the other thing that's happening is we have this donk sound. And I will say that is the case in this song right here. And this is a very traditional sound that's been used a lot in all types of dance music. It's not always this particular sound, but we're going to talk about the donk today, which is a sine wave based sound. However, quite often, and we'll talk about that more in videos later, for example, when we're going to talk about some of the 4x4 that Delta Heavy does, which will be somewhere next week. You can also use saw waves. You can do a lot more with the sound that comes where this donk is going to go. So let's listen to what this donk is really quickly, and let's see how it fits into that drum pattern. So yeah, you might recognize this type of sound. It's in so many different songs. And what it's going to do is it's going to take the space between all the kicks. So it's actually going to coincide with that snare as well when the snare kicks in. Let's push everything together right now and see what that sounds like. So the drum pattern and that donk together. And you can see that we're playing some different notes here. Comes in, immediately gives it a little bit more body. And then usually going along with the vocals, which we'll see in a second, we get this. And it's just really makes the track come alive like that. I don't know what happened, but it looks like I changed color. Anyway, let's keep going. So let's have a look at how this donk is made. I just want to go ahead and say that this donk and several other types of this particular sound that you can use for this are part of the Drum and Bass Essentials Serum Preset Pack, which you can find the link of on our website, howtodrumandbass.com, or in the link below. Go check it out. It has everything that you need to make drum and bass of any shape. Anyway, let's move on. So let's dive into what this donk sound is. And we're gonna talk about some interesting stuff here because we're gonna be working with FM sine waves. That's essentially what this sound is. So once again, just really quickly by itself, the donk right now sounds like this. Right, so just... Now you already see a bunch of stuff that's going on here, but actually let's ignore all of this. It's mostly just some side chaining and some efforts to change the exact way that it sounds because of the nature of the fact that this is a sine wave and it's kind of hard to distort it without it clipping, but we'll get to that. So let's group everything here real quick and let's turn it off, right? And let's go and check out what we've got here in Serum. Hey, quick break. If you're enjoying these videos and you like my style of teaching and you've been feeling like you want to get more into sound design, specifically for drum and bass, then maybe you want to check out my brand new online course called Drum and Bass Sound Design Mastery. It's an absolutely massive course with over 150 videos spanning 14 hours of content where we teach you two things. In the first half, we teach you everything there is to know about synthesizing sound in Serum. And in the second part, we show you how to use that knowledge to create the most popular sounds in drum and bass. I guess you can see it like the ultimate masterclass of drum and bass sound design. So if that sounds like something you could be interested in, check the link in the description below to find out more about this awesome course. All right, let's get on with the video. So this donk sound is used in so much dance music because it is quite simple. And when you look at some of the earlier hardware that people were playing around with, like, 30, 40 years ago, that's when sort of frequency modulation was introduced and when a lot of people started experimenting with this. And this is one of the simplest forms of frequency modulation. So what we've got here is essentially 3 sine waves that are modulating each other. We have a sub that's playing at 0 octaves, 1 sine wave that's playing at -1, and 1 sine wave that's playing at -2. And you can see here that we have FM from the sub applied and FM from A. Now, you'll see here that we have some macro buttons. I've just put these here because it's easier to mess around with the FMs that I find here in the macros, but basically all those do is control how far these FMs go. You can see here that, they're modulating this behavior here. So even though they are right here on this knob, when we play, you can see that they kind of come up to somewhere around here. We can also see that we have this envelope here. This envelope is what turns it plucky. You can see that because it goes down quite rapidly. It has a decay of about 700 milliseconds, which you can change, of course, but it will result in a less or more plucky sound. So around that sort of 600, 700 area is quite nice. And it's also adding some movement here. So you can see here that the absolute position of the FMs we determined with these 2 knobs, which will for both of them be roughly around sort of here, like maybe 40%, and here maybe at let's call it 10%. But we are also adding movement with this envelope here. We've applied those also to the FM from B here. And what's happening is they start out with lots of FM, and as the amplitude goes down through envelope 1, the FM also goes down. This is important because it does actually help shape the sound quite a bit. Let's say that we weren't using any of this FM, right? So we've bypassed these 2 now, and we're going to bypass this real quickly. Basically what that means is that we have no FM at all. We have what is almost essentially a kick. This is also why it fits so well into this drum pattern, because even though it's a bass sound, it is almost essentially a kick type sound. So let's look at all the other things that we are dealing with here. So we also, of course, have this little filter here. If we turn that off, we just get a little bit more of a boring sound. When we put the filter on, you just hear that it becomes a little bit more snappy. But a very important part of this is the resonance, actually, because let's turn that off. You can hear that when the FM is not really doing anything, this resonance also doesn't add that much. But when we add back the FM in here, so let's unbypass all of these, we can hear that adding resonance makes it a little bit more juicy and a little bit more snappy. And that's because the added harmonics that we've added by giving some frequency modulation on both of the main oscillators is going to be accentuated. It doesn't happen when we don't do that because that extra frequency content isn't there, but when it is, that sounds a lot less alive than this. Now, if you've got good ears, you can also hear that actually we have a little bit of pitch modulation going on. And you might have seen that we are using an LFO here, which is going down really rapidly at a quarter note on trigger mode, of course. And that's in the matrix. We've applied that here to the master tuning. So you can see that we have LFO1 on the master tuning, and that's basically giving it a little bit of punch, really, a little bit of clickiness, if you will. So with this button here, we can sort of modulate how much of that we want. So let's put it at 0. That sounds kind of stupid. But by adding a little bit of pitch modulation, so essentially it's going to start at a higher pitch and really rapidly go down, we add that sort of punch and that clickiness in there. You can hear it as well. It's almost like in the back. That's all that this is. And once again, that's going to help turn it into a bit more of a percussive element rather than just the bass. So let's jump really quickly to effects. We do want to compress this sound a little bit. You don't necessarily have to, but it definitely changes the sound, makes it a little bit more mellow if you wish. And then what we can do is we can pick a frequency range to accentuate. let's maybe put it somewhere there. Just give it a little bit of extra of those mid-range frequencies. And then another thing that we've done to it is this combs filter. So it was on while we were playing it before. It's off right now. So let's listen to what it sounds like without that comb filter. So what's happening here is it sounds a little bit dull, or maybe not dull, but it just sounds softer and less full. And so what a comb filter does, really quickly, let's say that we were gonna put a comb filter on here. You can see visually what it does, right? Let's put this combs on here. It just adds extra frequency content, or subtracts it basically. It makes things a little bit more gritty. But the added effect is that at higher cutoffs, it also gives a little bit of a boost while crunching up that top end. And that's kind of what we're doing here. When we look at this filter right here, we see that the cutoff is relatively high. So it's boosting some of that low to mid end, but it's crunching up a little bit of that upper harmonic, that frequency content. And that's just gonna make it a little bit more alive, a little bit more juicy, if you wish. And we can also use that as a parameter to change the way, the pronunciation almost of this donk. You don't want to put it too low. Now, mind you, if you use a comb filter and use it with the cutoff all the way up, it's essentially just a boost. It's almost, it's just like adding saturation and volume. So we kind of want to have it somewhere around here. And so, let's change this filter back to what it used to be, which was a MG Low 12. And you can really hear the difference now. Now we could, of course, up the gain here and get something similar. But the problem here is that it tends to distort quite easily. That's not really what we want. Instead, I think adding this combs filter is a lot nicer. It's not mandatory, but I think it's nice. And so now we have this, right? Which is already almost what we're looking for. But let's say that you wanted to sort of slightly change the intonation. Well, because this is such a simple sound, a lot of distortion is not going to do it much favor. And that's just by nature of the fact that it's sine waves that are modulated with each other. So let's really quickly see what that looks like, right? If we add saturation, it just, it starts clipping. Even at very low saturation. So that doesn't really work. But what we can do is we can add more comb filters, which, Kilohertz has a really, it's just very simple one that is free, by the way, that you can use for that. And what we can do is we can try to change the formants. So formant shifting is a whole nother topic if you want to get into it, but essentially it's going to take a part of the sort of upper and mid frequency spectrum and it's going to shift it around while keeping the lower parts of the fundamental the same. So it's going to play the same note, but it's going to change here in the frequency spectrum. And that can do interesting things, especially when you want to change the way something sounds, but you can't really distort it or add any type of extra harmonics to it. You can just shift the harmonics with this. So let's not do the saturation. Let's quickly add a compressor so we can get a little bit more loudness and a little bit more snappiness. And then let's see what we can do if we add this comb filter. So let's turn this device here on. And mind you that I also have some Duck Buddy side chaining going on here, but you don't really need to pay attention to that. And let's turn this off as well. So if we have this comb filter here and we turn it on, we can see that we can slightly change some accentuation in the sound. And I can just give it a little bit more of that hollowness that you may or may not be looking for. Now, alternatively, we can also use a free plugin like Auto Pitch where we can shift the formants around. So let's listen to what that sounds like. We do have to turn it on. So we can make it a bit more dull. Or we can make it a bit brighter. And we can see that even though we couldn't really change that much in the donk sound itself, which also if you play around with the FM, once you get past that sort of very small sweet spot, there's not that much to change about it. We can do that with this comb filtering and this auto pitch. And then additionally, like a last thing that you could potentially do is try to add a formant filter. So a formant filter basically just adds a vocal property filter. So almost as if someone's speaking to the sound. And that's another way that you can actually change a little bit how it sounds. And a lot of this doesn't sound very good, but you can always, just like with anything, find a sweet spot here. So that, for example, could work. That's too intense. It's just another subtle way to change sort of the sound of your donk. Let's say that for now, we don't really need this. We kind of have what we want right now. Now, one other thing that you could do, depending on what you did with all this extra frequency or, you know, what your settings are, if you feel like in the end it's supposed to be a bass and it's too bright, you can actually go ahead and add in an EQ to take out some of these highs. And yeah, so that's pretty much it. And so the way that this fits into a track is basically that it comes in stages, just like we've discussed. And what's really nice about Satellite is I've got the vocals right here. You can hear that that is what making the track evolve, following the vocals, or maybe the vocals are following the drum pattern. I don't really know. Let's turn that on.
If you're looking for me tonight, I'll take you high like satellite.
We got that
Make you
first initial part.
every time. Watch the
Like
stars
telling a
fall
story.
from the sky. Here we go. Feelings take you over.
Add an element.
Make your heart beat into mine. If you're
But
looking
it's almost like a build-up still until we get the
I'll take you
hi-hat.
high like satellite. Here we go.
So yeah, lots of energy. Super, super, super cool.